The screaming of metal stopped. The flashing warning lights went dark. For a moment that felt like forever, there was only silence on the bridge of the Resilience. Captain Ji-won Park opened her eyes, not remembering when she had closed them. The view screen showed something impossible. Instead of stars or empty space, swirling colors moved in patterns that made her head hurt to watch. It was like looking at a painting that existed in too many dimensions. "Status report," she called out, her voice sounding strange in the quiet. "All systems functional," Minho Lee replied, confusion clear in his voice. "But Captain, the readings don't make sense. According to my instruments, we're everywhere and nowhere at the same time." Navigator Soman Choi was staring at her console, with wide eyes. "I can't get a position fix. The stars are gone, all of them, and my compass is spinning like crazy." "Where are we?" asked Security Chief Young-ho Shin. Dr. Hyun Kim was already running scans, her fingers flying over her controls. "The energy readings are unlike anything in our databases. We're not just in a different place, we're in a different kind of place." Tactical Officer Do Hyun Ko's voice was tight with worry. "Captain, our weapons systems are changing. The energy signatures are completely different. It's like the ship is adapting to this environment." Ji-won walked to the view screen, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The swirling colors were beautiful but alien. Sometimes she thought she could see shapes in them, like buildings or creatures, but they disappeared when she tried to focus on them. "Yoon-hee, any communications from outside the ship?" Communications Officer Yoon-hee Song shook her head. "Nothing on normal channels. But I'm detecting something else. It's not radio or laser communication. It's more like thoughts." Before anyone could ask what she meant, the space in front of them began to change. The swirling colors gathered together, forming into something that looked almost like a person. But it was made of light and shadow, constantly shifting between different forms. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in their minds rather than coming through their ears. "Welcome humans to the Nexus realm." The crew exchanged nervous glances. Ji-won stepped forward. "Who are you? What is this place?" "We are what you might call the architects. We built the gates long ago, when the universe was young. This realm exists between your reality and all others. Here, thought becomes reality. Here, consciousness shapes existence itself." Dr. Hyun Kim moved closer to her instruments. "The energy readings support what it's saying. The physical laws here are completely different. Matter and energy seem to respond to mental commands. The architect's form shifted, becoming more solid. Your species interests us, humans. Most who enter the Nexus are consumed by its power. They either burn out from trying to use abilities beyond their understanding, or they lose themselves in the infinite possibilities." "What happened to them?" Ji-won asked. "They became the fragments, twisted shadows of their former selves, driven, mad by power they could not control. They drift through the Nexus now, consuming realities and spreading chaos." Minho's engineering station beeped softly. "Captain, the ship is definitely adapting. Our power systems are drawing energy directly from the space around us. It's like the environment itself is feeding us power." "That is correct," the architect confirmed. "In the Nexus, technology evolves to match the user's needs and mental state. Your ship is becoming something new, shaped by your collective will to survive and explore." Young-ho kept his hand near his weapon controls. "You said most species fail here. What makes you think we'll be different?" The architect studied them with eyes that seemed to see through them. "Your species has a rare quality. You maintain individual identity while working together. Most advanced civilizations either become hive minds or splinter into competing individuals. Humans do neither." Dr. Hyun Kim was fascinated despite the danger. "How long have you been here? What was your original form?" "We transcended physical existence millions of years ago. We became pure consciousness, free from the limits of matter and energy. But in gaining infinite power, we lost something precious. We lost the ability to grow, to change, to feel surprise or wonder." "Is that why you built the gates?" Ji-won asked. "To find species who could experience what you've lost?" "Partly. But the gates serve a greater purpose. The Nexus is dying, corrupted, By the failures of countless species, we need guardians who can preserve the balance between possibility and reality. Samin's navigation console suddenly came alive with new readings. Captain, I'm detecting massive structures in the distance. They look like cities? But they're floating in space, without any support. The view screen shifted to show what she had found. Vast constructions drifted through the colored space, some beautiful beyond description, others twisted into nightmare shapes. They were the remains of civilizations that had tried to master the Nexus and failed. The ruins of the proud and the foolish, the architect explained. Each believed they could control infinite power. Each learned too late that power without wisdom is destruction. Do-Yun's tactical systems were showing new readings. Captain, our weapons aren't just changing, they're becoming something else entirely. I'm reading energy signatures that could reshape matter at the molecular level. That is the gift and curse of the Nexus, the architect said. Here, your tools become extensions of your will. A weapon becomes whatever you need it to be, but so does every thought, every emotion, every fear. As if to demonstrate, a shadow passed by the view screen. It was vaguely human-shaped but wrong in every detail. Too many arms, eyes that burned like stars, and a mouth that seemed to devour light itself. A fragment, the architect identified. Once a member of a species much like yours. They sought to use the Nexus to remake their galaxy in their image. Instead, they remade themselves into something monstrous. The fragment seemed to notice their ship and turned toward them. As it approached, the crew could feel its presence pressing against their minds like a cold wind. "It's trying to get inside our heads," Yunhee gasped, her hands pressed to her temples. "Shields up," Jiwon ordered, but their shields weren't energy barriers anymore. Instead, a golden light surrounded the ship, shaped by their collective will, to protect each other. The fragment struck the barrier and bounced off, shrieking in frequencies that existed only in their minds. "Impressive," the architect observed. "Your defensive response was instinctive and effective. Most species try to attack fragments directly, which only feeds their power." The fragment circled their ship once more, then drifted away into the swirling colors. "Why did it leave?" Young-Ho asked. "Because you showed it something it has forgotten how to understand. Unity without dominance, strength without cruelty. The fragments feed on negative emotions and selfish desires. Your natural cooperation starves them." Dr. Hyun Kim was still studying her readings. "The energy patterns here are incredibly complex. It's as if reality itself is programmable, but the programming language is consciousness rather than mathematics." "You begin to understand," the architect said. "In your realm, mind serves matter. Here, matter serves mind. But with that power comes responsibility. Every thought has consequences. Every desire shapes reality." Jiwon felt the weight of those words. "What do you want from us?" "We offer you a choice, Captain Jiwon Park. Your species can learn to master the Nexus and become its guardians. You would gain power beyond imagination, but also the burden of protecting all realities from corruption. And if we refuse, then you may return to your realm. But know that the corruption is already spreading there. The fragments have found ways to breach the barriers between realities. Your home is in danger whether you accept our offer or not." Minho's readings confirmed the architect's words. "Captain, I'm detecting dimensional instabilities in the direction we came from. Something is definitely wrong back home." The crew looked at each other, understanding the terrible choice they faced. They could try to return home and hope for the best, or they could accept powers beyond human understanding and try to save everyone. "How do we know we won't become like the fragments?" Jiwon asked. "You don't," the architect replied honestly. "But you have qualities that suggest you might succeed where others failed. The question is, are you willing to risk becoming monsters to save your species and countless others?" Jiwon looked around at her crew. These people had followed her through an alien gate into an impossible realm. They had faced ancient beings and reality-warping creatures without losing their humanity. If anyone could handle this responsibility, it was them. "We need time to discuss this," she said. "Time moves differently here," the architect replied. "Take as long as you need. But remember, every moment you delay, the corruption spreads further into your reality." As the architect faded back into the swirling colors, the crew of the Resilience was left to contemplate the most important decision in human history. The crew meeting in the Resilience's main conference room felt different than any they had held before. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with gentle light, responding to their thoughts and emotions. Dr. Hyun Kim had determined that the ship was slowly adapting to the Nexus environment, becoming something between technology and living organism. "So let me understand this correctly," said Medical Officer Tae Hyun-won, leaning back in his chair. "We can become cosmic guardians with godlike powers, but we might also turn into reality-eating monsters in the process." "That's the basic choice." "Yes," Captain Ji-won Park replied. "The question is whether we take the risk or try to return home and hope the corruption doesn't reach Earth." Engineer Min-ho Lee pulled up his latest readings on the conference table's display. "The dimensional barriers between our reality and this one are breaking down. I'm detecting reality distortions spreading through our galaxy. If we do nothing, Earth becomes uninhabitable within decades." Lieutenant Sun Young-jin, one of the younger officers, spoke up. "Maybe that's our answer right there. We have the power to fix this. Isn't it our duty to try?" Security Chief Young-ho Shin shook his head. "Power corrupts. We've seen what happened to the other species that tried this. What makes us think we're special?" "Because we are special," Dr. Hyun Kim said quietly. "The architect was right about human psychology. We cooperate without losing individuality. Most species either become hive minds or fall apart into competing factions. We do neither." Communications Officer Yoon-hee Song had been quiet during the discussion, but now she looked up with concern. "I've been monitoring the ship's systems. They're not just adapting to the Nexus. They're starting to respond to our individual thoughts and emotions. A few minutes ago, I was feeling homesick, and the wall display showed pictures of Earth. That got everyone's attention. If the ship was reading their minds, the implications were serious." "It's starting already," Tactical Officer Do-hyun Ko observed. "The Nexus is changing us whether we choose it or not." Navigator Soman Choi had been studying the external sensors. "Captain, there's something else. I'm detecting movement in the ruins of those ancient civilizations. The fragments aren't just random monsters. They're organized. They're coming this way." The main display shifted to show the external view. In the swirling colors of the Nexus, dark shapes were indeed moving toward them. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Each one had once been a living being from an advanced civilization. Now they were twisted shadows of their former selves, driven by hunger for the corruption that had consumed them. "They're attracted to newcomers," explained the voice of the architect, appearing without warning in the conference room. "Fresh consciousness draws them like moths to flame." Several crew members reached for weapons that weren't there. In the Nexus, their sidearms had transformed into tools they didn't yet understand. "How long do we have?" Ji-won asked. "In your time measurements, perhaps an hour. But time is fluid here. They could arrive sooner if they sense weakness or fear." Lieutenant Sun Young-jin stood up, her eyes bright with determination. "Then we need to make our choice now. We can't fight them as we are, but with Nexus powers, we could protect ourselves and everyone back home. Or we could become just like them," Young-ho countered. "Power without wisdom is exactly what created the fragments in the first place." Medical Officer Tae Hyun-won was studying his readings of the crew's biological responses. "There's something interesting here. Our neural activity is synchronizing. Not enough to lose individuality, but enough to create a kind of mental harmony. Maybe that's our advantage." The architect nodded. "Your species naturally forms what we call conscious consensus. You can share thoughts and emotions without losing your sense of self. This is incredibly rare among sapient species." Minho was working with the ship's new systems, learning how they responded to mental commands. "Captain, I think I can reinforce our reality bubble. Give us some protection from the fragments while we decide." "Do it," Ji-won ordered. The engineer closed his eyes and focused. Around the ship, a barrier of crystalline light formed, similar to the gate they had passed through. The approaching fragment struck it and bounced off, shrieking in frustration. "Impressive," the architect said. "But this is only a temporary measure. The fragments will find a way through eventually." Dr. Hyun Kim was monitoring the barriers. "Construction. The energy patterns are fascinating. Minho isn't just using technology. He's using his will to reshape reality itself." That's how it works here, the architect explained. Technology, consciousness, and reality are all aspects of the same thing. In your realm, they seem separate. Here, their unity is obvious. The crew could feel the change in themselves as well. Their thoughts were clearer, their emotions more focused. But with that clarity came new temptations. Each of them could sense the vast power available in the Nexus, waiting to be claimed. Salmon found herself imagining what it would be like to navigate through dimensions, to see the entire universe at once. The desire was intoxicating. Do-Yun felt the pull of weapons that could unmake stars, defenses that could protect entire galaxies. The tactical possibilities were endless. Even Tai-Hyun, dedicated to healing, sensed the ability to cure any disease, to extend life indefinitely, to reshape biology itself according to his will. You feel it now, the architect observed. The seductive nature of infinite possibility. This is where most species fall. They become drunk on power and lose sight of wisdom. But something else was happening to the crew. As each of them felt the pull of ultimate power, they also felt the presence of their crewmates. Ji-won's steady leadership, Young-ho's protective instincts, Hyun-Kim's curiosity tempered by caution. They were connected now in ways they had never experienced. "We're still ourselves," Yoon-hee said in wonder. "I can feel all of your thoughts, but I'm still me." "This is what makes humans unique," the architect explained. "Other species either maintain rigid individuality or dissolve into collective consciousness. You somehow do both simultaneously." The fragments were pressing harder against Minho's barrier now. Some of them had once been beings of great beauty and intelligence. Now they were distorted nightmares, their original forms twisted by the uncontrolled power they had tried to wield. "They're showing us our possible future," Young-ho said grimly. "Not necessarily," Dr. Hyun-Kim replied. "Look closer at their attack patterns. They're not coordinated. Each fragment is acting purely on instinct, driven by hunger and rage. They've lost the ability to work together." She was right. The fragments were powerful individually, but they had no strategy, no teamwork. They had gained cosmic abilities but lost their capacity for cooperation. That's what corrupted them, Ji-won realized. Not the power itself, but the isolation that came with it. They tried to become gods, but gods are alone. Lieutenant Sun Young-jin was watching the fragments with a mixture of pity and determination. "We don't have to choose between power and humanity. We can have both." "The risks are still enormous," Taehyun warned. "What if we're wrong? What if we end up like them?" "Then we fail together," Ji-won said simply. "But if we don't try, everyone fails anyway." The crew looked at each other, feeling the mental connection that was growing stronger by the minute. They were still individuals, but they were also something more. A team in the truest sense, bound together by shared purpose and mutual trust. "The fragments are breaking through," Minho reported. His barrier was developing cracks, streams of dark energy seeping through. "Then it's time to choose," the architect said. "Accept the power of the Nexus and risk corruption, or remain as you are and face certain destruction." Captain Ji-won Park stood up, feeling the weight of command in a way she never had before. This decision would affect not just her crew, but potentially every living being in the universe. "We accept," she said. "But we do it our way, together." The architect's form brightened with what might have been approval. "Then let the transformation begin." Energy flooded through the ship and its crew. Reality bent around them as they began to change, becoming something new. Something that had never existed before in the long history of the Nexus. As the fragments burst through the failing barrier, they found not helpless prey, but something they could not understand. Humans who had gained cosmic power without losing their humanity. Individuals who had become more than themselves without ceasing to be themselves. The real test was just beginning. The transformation was like being reborn while staying awake through the entire process. Captain Ji-won Park felt her consciousness expand beyond the confines of her skull, reaching out to touch the fabric of reality itself. But unlike the corruption that had consumed other species, she remained anchored by the presence of her crew. When the energy storm finally passed, the crew of the Resilience found themselves changed, but still recognizably human. They could perceive dimensions that had no names, manipulate matter with pure thought, and sense the connections between all things. Yet they still felt hunger, still needed sleep, still laughed at Minho's terrible jokes. "Status report," Ji-won called out, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't existed before. "All crew members present and functional," reported Dr. Hyun Kim, though her definition of functional now included the ability to analyze reality at the quantum level with her naked eyes. The transformation appears to have been successful. The fragments that had been attacking their ship hung motionless in the swirling space around them. They seemed confused, unable to comprehend what the humans had become. "They don't know how to process us," observed Tactical Officer Do-hyun Ko. His new senses could read the fragments' thought patterns, chaotic swirls of hunger and rage with no underlying intelligence. "We're something they've never encountered before." The architect materialized beside them, its form more solid than before. "Remarkable. In all our eons of existence, we have never seen a species maintain such coherent identity while embracing Nexus transformation." "What happens now?" asked Navigator Soman Choi. She was mapping dimensional currents that flowed through the Nexus like invisible rivers, pathways that connected all realities. "Now you learn the true scope of your responsibility," the architect replied. "The corruption is not limited to this realm. It spreads through the barriers between dimensions, slowly consuming every reality it touches." Engineer Minho Lee was interfacing directly with the ship's systems now, his consciousness merged with the vessel's adaptive intelligence. "Captain, I'm detecting massive structural damage to the dimensional barriers. It's like cosmic termites have been eating away at the foundation of existence itself." The main display showed what he had discovered. The Nexus, which should have been a stable bridge between realities, was shot through with dark veins of corruption. These represented the accumulated failures of species that had tried to transcend their limitations without accepting the consequences. "How bad is it?" Ji-won asked. Dr. Hyun Kim's enhanced perception was already analyzing the damage. "At current rates of degradation, the barriers will collapse completely within 50 years. When that happens, all realities will merge into one chaotic soup of conflicting physical laws. The end of everything," whispered Communications Officer Yoon-hee Song. Her new abilities let her hear the death screams of entire universes as the corruption spread through them. "Not everything," the architect corrected. "The Nexus itself would survive, but it would become a realm of pure chaos. No consciousness could exist there. No life, no thought, no dreams, only endless, meaningless change." Security Chief Young-ho Shin was studying the fragments that surrounded their ship. "These creatures are part of the problem, aren't they? They're spreading the corruption." "They are both symptom and cause," the architect confirmed. "Each fragment represents a failed attempt at transcendence. Their very existence weakens the dimensional barriers, and they hunger for more corruption, seeking to drag other realities down to their level." Medical Officer Tae-hyun Won was monitoring the biological responses of his crewmates to their transformation. "There's something else. I'm detecting quantum entanglement between our neural patterns and the dimensional barriers themselves. We're connected to the structure of reality now." That revelation hit the crew like a cold wind. They weren't just observers of the cosmic crisis. They were part of it now, their thoughts and actions directly affecting the stability of all existence. "The burden of guardianship," the architect explained. "To heal the Nexus, you must sacrifice your individual existence and become part of the dimensional framework itself. You would live forever, but as cosmic principles rather than human beings." Lieutenant Sun Young-jin, who had been eager to embrace power, suddenly looked uncertain. "What would happen to our families, our friends back on Earth?" "They would be saved," the architect replied. "All realities would be stabilized, but you would no longer be able to return to them as you are now." The choice was even more terrible than they had imagined. Save everyone by ceasing to be themselves, or remain human and watch the universe die. Minho was working frantically with his enhanced engineering abilities. "There has to be another way. What if we could create stable pocket realities? Places where humanity could survive, even if the main barriers collapse?" "Possible," the architect acknowledged. But such refuges would require constant maintenance, and you could only save a fraction of the threatened realities. How small a fraction? Jiwan asked. Perhaps 1% of existing conscious life. The rest would be lost to the chaos. The crew fell silent, contemplating the mathematics of cosmic genocide. Save themselves and a tiny remnant of galactic civilization, or sacrifice their humanity to save everyone. Soman was still mapping the dimensional currents when she made a disturbing discovery. Captain, the corruption isn't random. It's following specific pathways, spreading along routes of conscious thought and emotion. It's targeting realities with the most complex life forms. The fragments hunger for consciousness, the architect explained. They seek out realities with advanced civilizations and corrupt them first. Your Earth is particularly attractive to them because of humanity's unique neural patterns. Dr. Hyun Kim's analysis confirmed their worst fears. The corruption is already present in our home galaxy. I'm detecting reality distortions around several star systems. Earth has maybe 10 years before the effects become obvious, and maybe 50 before it becomes uninhabitable, Taehyun added grimly. The weight of decision was crushing. Every moment they delayed, more realities were consumed by the spreading chaos. But the cost of action was almost unbearable. Yoon-hee had been quiet during the discussion, using her enhanced communication abilities to listen to the quantum frequencies that carried information across dimensions. Now she looked up with shock in her eyes. There are messages, distress calls from realities that are already being consumed, billions of voices crying out for help. She shared what she had heard through their mental link. The crew experienced a brief taste of cosmic agony, the death cries of entire civilizations as their realities collapsed into chaos. We can't ignore that, Young-ho said firmly, no matter what it costs us personally. But we also can't abandon our own people, Sun-young argued. There has to be a third option. Jiwan was studying the corruption patterns on the display, her enhanced perception showing her details that normal human senses could never detect. Architect? You said the fragments hunger for consciousness. What if we gave them something else to feed on? Explain. The corruption spreads because it consumes complex thought patterns, but what if we could redirect it, channel it towards something that could absorb it without being destroyed? Dr. Hyun Kim caught on immediately. A consciousness trap, something that appears to be a complex civilization but is actually designed to neutralize the corruption. We could build decoy realities, Minho added excitedly. Fake dimensions that look like rich feeding grounds but actually cleanse the corruption instead of spreading it. The architect's form flickered with what might have been surprise. In all our existence, we never considered such an approach. It would require enormous skill and coordination. It would also require us to remain human, Taehyun pointed out. We can't build effective decoys for human consciousness if we're no longer human ourselves. Soman was already calculating the dimensional mechanics. It's possible. Difficult, dangerous, maybe impossible, but possible. How long would it take? Jiwon asked. Decades, the architect replied. Perhaps centuries, and there would be no guarantee of success. You might save everyone, or you might simply delay the inevitable while exhausting yourselves in the attempt. But we'd still be ourselves, Uni said softly. We'd still be human. Young-ho was studying the tactical implications. The fragments won't just let us build these decoy realities, they'll fight us every step of the way. Then we fight back, Jiwon decided. We use our new abilities to protect the construction process and destroy any fragments that try to interfere. The architect watched them with ancient eyes. You choose the hardest path, the one with the least chance of success. We choose the path that lets us stay true to what we are, Jiwon replied. Human beings don't abandon their people, and we don't give up our identity for convenience. Even if it means the universe might end anyway. The crew looked at each other, their mental link carrying the weight of their shared decision. They were afraid, but they were not alone. And being human had always meant doing impossible things for the people they cared about. Especially then, Jiwon said firmly. If the universe is going to end, it won't be because humanity gave up. The architect's form brightened. Then let us begin. But know that once you start this path, there will be no turning back. You will face enemies beyond county. The war began with silence. Captain Ji-won Park stood on what had once been the bridge of the Resilience, though the ship had transformed into something beyond conventional description. It existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions, its hull, crafted from crystallized thought and reinforced with pure determination. Through the viewports, she could see the first battlefield of humanity's impossible war. "Target acquired," reported Tactical Officer Do Hyun-ko. His consciousness was linked directly to weapons that rewrote the laws of physics with each shot. Fragment cluster moving toward the Altair decoy reality. Estimated strength, 300 entities. The decoy realities were humanity's greatest achievement and most desperate gamble. Engineer Min-ho Lee had spent months learning to craft pocket dimensions that looked and felt like thriving civilizations, but were actually designed to neutralize the corruption that fed the fragments. Each one was a masterpiece of dimensional engineering, a fake universe so convincing that even the fragments' hunger was fooled. "Begin the hunt," Ji-won ordered. The transformed Resilience moved through the Nexus like a predator, its passage barely disturbing the swirling energies around it. The crew had learned to think collectively when needed while maintaining their individual perspectives. It was a balance that the fragments, driven by isolated hunger, could never achieve. Dr. Hyun Kim monitored the corruption levels as they approached the fragment cluster. "The decoy is working. They're feeding on the false reality, but instead of gaining power, they're being slowly cleansed of their corruption. Some of them are noticing," warned Navigator Somin Choi. Her enhanced perception could track the movement of consciousness across dimensional boundaries. "The smarter ones are starting to pull back." "Not if we have anything to say about it," muttered Security Chief Young-ho Shin. His role had evolved far beyond simple ship security. Now he coordinated defensive operations across multiple realities, simultaneously protecting the construction sites where new decoy dimensions were being built. The fragment cluster was massive, containing the corrupted remnants of at least a dozen different species. Some had once been peaceful traders, others proud warriors, still others brilliant scientists. Now they were all equally twisted by the power they had failed to control. "Engaging," Do Hyun announced. The weapons that fired from the Resilience weren't energy beams or missiles. They were concentrated applications of human will, bullets made from the desire to protect and heal rather than dominate and destroy. When they struck the fragments, the creatures didn't simply die. They were reminded of what they had once been. It said, first fragment hit by the weapons stopped mid-flight, its twisted form flickering between corruption and memory. For a moment, it almost looked like the graceful being it had once been. Then the memory faded, and it resumed its attack, but with less fury than before. "The weapons are working," Dr. Hyun Kim observed. "We're not just fighting them, we're trying to save them." "Some can be saved," confirmed Communications Officer Yoon-hee Song. Her abilities had evolved to let her communicate with consciousness itself, reaching into the corrupted minds of the fragments to find any trace of their original selves. The ones that haven't been corrupted too long still have fragments of memory, personality. We can work with that. The battle was unlike anything in conventional warfare. Instead of trying to destroy their enemies, the crew of the Resilience fought to redeem them. It was slower, more dangerous, and infinitely more difficult than simple destruction. But it was also the most human thing they could do. "Fragment breaking away from the cluster," Somin reported. It's trying to communicate." On the view screen, one of the smaller fragments had stopped attacking and was pulsing with a pattern of lights. Yoon-hee focused her abilities on it, translating the signal. "It's asking for help," she said in wonder. "It remembers being someone named Korvash, a scientist from a species called the Helix. It's been fighting the corruption for centuries, trying to maintain some sense of self. Can we extract it?" Ji-won asked. Medical Officer Taehyun Won studied the fragment's energy patterns. "Possibly, but it would require us to lower our defenses and make direct contact. Very risky." "Do it," Ji-won decided. "If we can save even one of them, we prove that redemption is possible." The Resilience extended a tendril of crystallized compassion toward the fragment. The moment they made contact, the crew experienced a flood of alien memories. They saw the rise and fall of the Helix civilization, felt the joy of scientific discovery and the terror of cosmic transcendence gone wrong. Corvash had been a xenobiologist, studying life forms across the galaxy. When his people found their own gate to the Nexus, he had been among the first to volunteer for transformation. The process had gone wrong almost immediately, corrupting his species and turning them into the very monsters they had hoped to overcome. I fought, Corvash's memories whispered to them. For so long I fought to remember who I was. But the hunger, it never stops. It can stop, Tae-hyun assured him, using his enhanced medical abilities to carefully separate the corruption from the original consciousness. We've learned how to resist it. Let us help you. The extraction was delicate work. Like surgery performed with pure thought, Tae-hyun slowly peeled away layers of corruption, while Yeon-hee maintained communication, and Dr. Hyun Kim monitored the quantum effects. The rest of the crew provided support, their combined will creating a protective bubble around the process. When it was finished, Corvash existed as a pure consciousness, free from corruption, but also without physical form. He was dying, his life force too damaged to survive on its own. Give me a few more minutes, he pleaded. Let me help you understand what you're fighting. Through his fading thoughts, Corvash shared crucial intelligence. The fragments weren't just random monsters. They were organized, led by something called the Prime Paradox, an entity that had once been the collective consciousness of the first species to enter the Nexus. It had become so corrupted that it existed, as pure impossibility, a living contradiction that fed on the failure of others. It's building something, Corvash warned. A reality storm that will collapse all dimensional barriers at once. Your decoy dimensions won't stop it. Nothing will stop it except... His consciousness faded before he could finish the warning. Except what? Ji-won demanded, but Corvash was gone, his final act of redemption complete. The remaining fragments in the cluster had witnessed the extraction and were fleeing in terror. They had never seen one of their own rescued from corruption before. The very possibility threatened their understanding of existence. Let them run, Ji-won ordered. They'll spread word of what they've seen. Maybe some of the others will come to us voluntarily. Minho was analyzing the data from Corvash's memories. Captain, if he's right about this prime paradox, our current strategy won't be enough. We need to find it and deal with it directly. Where would something like that hide? Young-ho asked. Soman was already plotting dimensional coordinates. At the center of the Nexus, where all realities converge, it would be the most chaotic, dangerous place in existence. Then that's where we're going, Ji-won decided. Dr. Hyun Kim looked alarmed. Captain, we're not ready for that kind of confrontation. We've only been fighting fragments for a few months. This prime paradox has had millions of years to grow in power. And every day we wait, it gets stronger, Ji-won pointed out. Meanwhile, the corruption spreads to more realities. How many worlds have died while we've been learning to fight? The question hung in the air like an accusation. They all knew the answer. Hundreds of civilizations had fallen while humanity struggled to master their new abilities. Every moment of delay cost countless lives. There's something else, Yoon-hee said quietly. I've been monitoring quantum communications from our home reality. The corruption has reached Earth's solar system. People are starting to notice reality distortions. The news hit the crew like a physical blow. Their transformation had given them the ability to perceive all of time and space, but it also meant they could see their home being slowly consumed by chaos. How long do they have? Tae-hyun asked. Years, maybe months, if the corruption accelerates, Yoon-hee replied. The distortions are subtle now, but they're growing stronger. Ji-won felt the weight of command more heavily than ever before. They had gained cosmic power, but it came with cosmic responsibility. Every decision affected not just their crew, but every living being in existence. Minho, how long to prepare for an assault on the center of the Nexus? The engineer consulted with the ship's transformed systems. To do it right, months of preparation. To do it with any hope of survival, weeks. To do it now, we'd be walking into certain death. But if we don't do it at all, everyone dies anyway, Young-ho pointed out. Ji-won looked around at her crew, these humans who had followed her beyond the edge of known reality and never once complained about the impossible burden they carried. They were tired, scared, and facing odds that would make gods weep. But they were still human, still stubborn, still refusing to give up. "We go," she decided. "Not because we're ready, but because we're needed. Prepare the ship for maximum temporal acceleration. If we're going to die trying to save the universe, let's at least do it quickly." As the Resilience began its journey toward the heart of all existence, the crew knew they were heading. The center of the Nexus was a place where mathematics went insane. Captain Ji-Won Park watched through the transformed viewports as the Resilience approached the source of all impossibility. Space folded in on itself here, creating geometries that hurt to perceive. Time flowed backward and forward simultaneously. The laws of physics were more like suggestions, and even those were being constantly rewritten. "I'm reading energy levels that shouldn't exist," reported engineer Minho Lee, his voice tight with strain. "The instruments can't even calculate proper numbers anymore. Everything just reads as infinite or undefined." "Visual contact with the target," announced navigator Somin Choi, though what appeared on their screens defied description. The prime paradox was a writhing mass of contradictions, simultaneously the largest and smallest thing they had ever seen. It existed as pure impossibility given form, a living violation of everything that made sense. Dr. Hyun Kim was studying the entity with instruments that existed in multiple dimensions at once. It's not just corrupted consciousness, it's corrupted reality itself. Every paradox that was ever conceived, every logical impossibility that was ever imagined, it's all gathered here in one place. The prime paradox noticed their approach and turned its attention toward them. When it spoke, its voice was the sound of universes screaming as they collapsed into chaos. "More little gods," it thundered across dimensional barriers. "Come to join the feast of forever. Come to learn that possibility is pain." Communications. Officer Yoon-hee Song struggled to maintain her sanity as the entity's words hammered against her enhanced perception. "It's not communicating in language. It's communicating in pure concept. The ideas are trying to rewrite our thoughts." "Shields up," ordered Security Chief Young-ho Shin, though their defensive systems were no longer made of energy or matter. Instead, they projected a barrier of stubborn human logic, a refusal to accept that impossibility was possible. The prime paradox laughed, and the sound shattered several nearby realities. "Shields of meat thought, walls of mortal dreams. I am the answer to every question that should not be asked." It attacked without moving, simply by existing more intensely in their direction. The crew felt their enhanced abilities strain against the assault of pure paradox. Their consciousness began to fray at the edges as impossible concepts tried to take root in their minds. "It's trying to make us like itself," gasped Medical Officer Tae-hyun-won, "turning our thoughts into contradictions, our logic into chaos." Then, "We don't think logically," Ji-won decided. "We think humanly." She opened her mind to her crew, sharing not enhanced cosmic perception but simple human memories. The taste of coffee in the morning, the feeling of rain on Earth, the sound of laughter from old friends, the stubborn, illogical, beautiful determination to keep going even when everything seemed hopeless. The prime paradox recoiled as if burned. "What is this? These thoughts make no sense. Why do you resist perfection? Why do you choose limitation?" "Because we're human," Tactical Officer Do-Yun Ko replied, his weapons systems transforming into something unprecedented, not tools of destruction, but instruments of creation, designed to forge reality rather than unmake it. And humans are really good at being stubborn about stupid things. The battle that followed was fought not with energy weapons or physical force, but with competing concepts of existence itself. The prime paradox hurled impossibilities at them, trying to convince them that up was down, that existence was non-existence, that consciousness was unconsciousness. The crew of the Resilience fought back with the most powerful weapon in their arsenal, their refusal to make sense. They were creatures who fell in love despite logic, who helped strangers for no good reason, who kept hoping even when hope was mathematically impossible. "You cannot defeat perfect paradox with imperfect logic," the entity raged. "We're not trying to defeat it," Dr. Hyun Kim said, her consciousness reaching out to touch the swirling chaos of the prime paradox. "We're trying to heal it." That stopped the entity cold. For the first time in millions of years, it experienced something it had forgotten existed. Confusion. Heal? I am beyond healing. I am the wound that reality inflicts upon itself. No, Uni said gently, her communication abilities reaching into the heart of the entity's tortured consciousness. You're the first species that entered the Nexus. You're the ones who tried to become gods and lost yourselves in the process. You're not a wound. You're the patient. Through her enhanced perception, she could see the truth buried deep within, the prime paradox. It had once been a species called the Infinite, beings of pure curiosity who had discovered the gates and rushed through them in their eagerness to understand everything. They had gained ultimate knowledge but lost the ability to experience wonder, learned to manipulate all of reality, but forgotten how to feel joy. We can help you remember, Taehyun offered, his medical abilities extending beyond the physical, into the realm of consciousness itself. We can show you how to be curious without losing yourself, how to have power without losing your identity. Impossible, the prime paradox whispered, but its voice was smaller now, touched by something that might have been hope. We tried for eons to find a way back. We only became more lost. Because you tried to solve it logically, Minho explained. You tried to engineer your way out of a problem that requires accepting contradiction. You became a paradox because you couldn't accept that some things don't have logical solutions. Soman was mapping the entity's structure with her enhanced navigation abilities. Look at the pattern. It's not chaos. It's a recursive loop. They keep trying to solve the same problem over and over, each attempt making them more paradoxical. So, we break the loop, Ji-won decided. Not by solving their problem, but by helping them accept that the problem doesn't need to be solved. The crew of the Resilience did something that had never been attempted in the history of the Nexus. Instead of fighting the prime paradox or trying to fix it, they simply embraced it. They opened their consciousness to the entity and shared their most human quality, the ability to live with contradictions. They showed the prime paradox how humans could be both selfish and selfless, logical and emotional, hopeful and realistic. They demonstrated the art of being imperfect beings, who somehow created perfect moments, limited creatures who touched the infinite through love and sacrifice and sheer stubborn determination. The prime paradox shuddered as alien concepts flooded through its consciousness. The idea that strength could come from acknowledging weakness, that wisdom could grow from admitting ignorance, that the most powerful beings in the universe were the ones who chose not to use their power. This is not logical, it whispered. Exactly, Ji-won said with a smile. Welcome to being human. The transformation was slower than their own had been, but infinitely more profound. The prime paradox didn't become human, but it learned to think like humans thought. It retained its vast power and knowledge, but gained the ability to choose restraint. It remained impossible, but impossibility no longer tortured it. As the entity healed, the corruption that had spread throughout, the Nexus began to fade. The fragments throughout the dimensional realm felt the change and stopped their endless hunger. Some, like Korvash, could be saved. Others were too far gone, but they no longer spread chaos wherever they went. The barriers are stabilizing, Dr. Hyun Kim reported with wonder. Reality is healing itself. Not healing, the entity that had been the prime paradox corrected, its voice now filled with something like joy. Growing, learning, becoming something new. The crew watched as the Nexus transformed around them. The swirling chaos of broken realities began to organize itself into something unprecedented. A multi-dimensional space where consciousness could explore infinite possibilities without losing itself in the process. What happens now? Young-ho asked. Now we go home, Ji-won decided. Back to Earth, back to our people. We've done what we came to do. But the guardianship, So-min protested. Someone needs to watch over the Nexus. The transformed prime paradox pulsed with gentle humor. We will watch. We who learn to be impossible without being destructive. And others will come, as they always have. But now they will find teachers instead of predators. As the Resilience began its journey back toward their home reality, the crew reflected on what they had accomplished. They had entered a realm where they were never meant to go, gained powers they were never meant to have, and faced enemies they were never meant to fight. But they had done it all while remaining fundamentally, stubbornly human. They had proven that the greatest strength wasn't the ability to transcend limitation, but the wisdom to choose when limitation was a gift rather than a burden. Will we stay like this? Taehyun wondered, looking at his hands that could now reshape. Matter with a thought. I think so, Dr. Hyun Kim replied. But we'll use our abilities to help rather than to rule. We'll be guardians of humanity's future, but we'll do it as humans. When they finally emerged from the gate into normal space, they found the Veltar fleet still waiting. Admiral Velnok's ship moved to intercept them. Weapons ready. Human vessel. The alien commander's voice crackled over their communications. Explain your emergence from the Forbidden Realm. Ji-won smiled as she opened a channel. Admiral, we have a story to tell you. And after that we have... Commander Taemin Park stood on the bridge of the orbital station Sejong, watching the massive alien ships appear in Earth's sky. The ships were beautiful and terrible at the same time. They looked like floating crystals made of silver and blue, light. Each one was 10 times bigger than anything humans had ever built. Sir, we're getting a message, said Communications Officer Minho. His voice was shaking. Nobody could blame him. The alien fleet had just appeared without warning, blocking out the stars. Taemin nodded. Put it on the main screen. The face that appeared was not human. It had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern and skin that looked like living crystal. When it spoke, the words came through a translator that made its voice sound cold and empty. I am Fleet Commander Veltharion of the Galactic Council. We speak to the species known as humans. Your time of freedom in this galaxy has ended. Taemin felt his stomach drop. The Galactic Council was real. For 3 years, Earth had known about them. The Council was made up of 12 different alien species who ruled most of the galaxy. They had been watching Earth since humans first left their solar system 50 years ago. You have shown that your species is too dangerous, Veltharion continued. You fight instead of talk. You build weapons instead of art. You spread across space like a disease. The Council has decided that you cannot be allowed to continue. Down on Earth, in the capital city of New Geneva, President Haiwan Choi was having an emergency meeting with her top advisors. The room was full of tension. Everyone knew this day might come, but nobody wanted to believe it would actually happen. What are our options? President Choi asked. General Woo Jin Nam, head of Earth's military forces, looked grim. They have 200 ships in our solar system. Our entire space navy has maybe 50 ships, and most of them are exploration vessels with light weapons. Dr. So Young Kim, Earth's top expert on alien life, shook her head. This is wrong. They don't understand us at all. Yes, humans can be aggressive, but only when we're threatened. We're protective, not violent. Try telling that to them, General Nam replied. They've made up their minds. Back on the Sejong station, Veltharion was still talking. The Council offers you one choice. You will surrender all military weapons and technology. Your people will be moved to special worlds where you can live safely under our protection. You have 72 of your hours to decide. Taemin stepped forward. And if we refuse? The alien's 4 eyes seemed to glow brighter. Then you will be removed by force. Your cities will be destroyed. Your people will be scattered. Your world will be given to a species that can use it properly. The communication ended. The bridge of the Sejong fell silent except for the quiet hum of the computers. Sir, said Lieutenant Yeon-seo, the station's tactical officer, what are your orders? Taemin thought for a moment. He remembered his daughter back on Earth. She was only 8 years old and loved to draw pictures of spaceships. Would she grow up on some alien world, never knowing the sky she was born under? Contact Admiral Dongwoo Lee, Taemin said. Priority 1 message. Tell him the wolves are at the door. Admiral Lee was on the hidden military base inside the asteroid belt. The base was called Haven, and officially it didn't exist. For the past 10 years, Earth had been secretly building ships and weapons there, just in case something like this happened. When Admiral Lee got the message, he smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator who had been waiting for his prey to make a mistake. Begin Phase 1, he told his staff. Send the signal to all hidden bases. It's time to show the galaxy what humans are really capable of. All across the solar system, in hidden bases on moons and asteroids, human ships began to wake up. These weren't the exploration ships the aliens could see. These were warships, built in secret, designed specifically to fight alien technology. On Earth, President Choi was meeting with her cabinet again. The room was full of arguing voices. "We have to surrender," said Defense Minister Park Ji-sung. "We can't fight them. It would be suicide. If we surrender, we lose everything anyway," replied Foreign Minister Lee Hana. "At least if we fight, we die as free people." Dr. Kim stood up. "There might be another way. I've been studying their technology for 3 years. They use something called quantum entanglement for all their communications. It makes them incredibly coordinated, but it also makes them vulnerable." "Vulnerable how?" President Choi asked. "If we could get into their network, we could turn their own technology against them. Dr. Young-Soo Han has been working on something he calls a quantum virus. It's designed to spread through their communication system and disrupt their technology." General Nam leaned forward. "How close is he to finishing it?" "It's ready," Dr. Kim said quietly. "We've been preparing for this day for 3 years. The question is, are we ready to use it?" President Choi looked around the room. These people were her friends as well as her advisors. They had families, children, dreams for the future. The aliens wanted to take all of that away. "How many people would die if we fight?" she asked. "Billions," General Nam said honestly. "On both sides." "And how many will die if we surrender?" Dr. Kim spoke up. "Maybe not physically, but everything that makes us human will die. Our freedom, our culture, our right to choose our own path among the stars." President Choi closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her expression was hard as steel. "Send a message to Admiral Lee. Tell him to prepare the fleet. If the aliens want a war, we'll give them one they'll never forget." Back in space, the alien fleet was positioning itself around Earth. Veltharion stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Harmony. He felt satisfied. Another primitive species would be brought under council control. It was always the same. The young species would threaten and bluster, but in the end, they always surrendered when they saw the power of the council. His tactical officer, a reptilian creature called Sectar, approached him. "Commander, we're detecting increased communication activity from the human homeworld. Let them talk," Veltharion said. "Fear makes primitive species very talkative. Soon they will realize they have no choice but to submit." What Veltharion didn't know was that Captain Jiho Kang and his Special Forces team were already aboard his ship. They had used stolen alien technology to slip past the Council's sensors. They were hiding in the ship's maintenance areas, waiting for the signal to begin their mission. Captain Kang whispered into his communicator. "Phoenix team is in position. We're ready to plant the virus when you give the word." All around the solar system, other human teams were doing the same thing. They had spent years learning how to infiltrate alien ships. Now all that training was about to pay off. Dr. Han sat in his laboratory on the moon looking at the small device that contained his quantum virus. It was no bigger than a coin, but it could destroy the entire Galactic Council. "Are you sure about this?" asked his assistant, Engineer Mi-jin Yu. Dr. Han thought about his son, who wanted to be a starship pilot when he grew up. The aliens made their choice when they came here with threats instead of friendship. Now we make ours. The countdown to humanity's ultimatum had begun. In 72 hours, the galaxy would learn that humans were indeed as dangerous as the Council feared. But they would also learn that sometimes being dangerous was exactly what survival required. Earth was preparing to show the universe that when you threaten a human's family, you don't get mercy, you get war.